Research is hard, but your tools should not be. Subthesis.com is the free alternative to expensive software. Whether you need to calculate Cronbach's alpha or organize your field notes, Subthesis has a tool for it. No paywalls and no registration required. Check the link in the description and let's dive into today's lesson. Welcome to the PM Playbook. I'm going to share something that most project management courses won't tell you up front. The majority of projects fail, not some, not a few, the majority. And today we're going to explore exactly why that happens and, more importantly, what you can do to make sure your projects don't become another statistic. Let's start with a reality check. According to research from the Project Management Institute and the Standish Group, approximately 70% of projects fail to meet their original goals. More than half experience significant scope creep, and only about 29% actually finish on time and within budget. These aren't small companies with inexperienced teams. These statistics include Fortune 500 organizations with dedicated PMOs and certified project managers. Before we go further, let's define what failure actually means in project management. It's not just about canceled projects. Failure includes missed deadlines that impact business operations. It includes budget overruns that eat into organizational profits. It includes scope changes that completely derail the original objectives. It includes stakeholder dissatisfaction, even when deliverables are technically complete. And yes, it includes projects that are abandoned or canceled outright. Now that we understand what we're up against, let's examine the 5 root causes of project failure. These aren't surface-level symptoms. These are the fundamental issues that, if left unaddressed, will doom your project before it even begins. The first root cause is unclear objectives. This sounds obvious, but it's shockingly common. Teams launch into execution without clearly defining what success looks like. Vague success criteria leave room for interpretation. Without measurable outcomes, you can't prove whether the project succeeded or failed. And perhaps most dangerous, different stakeholders often have completely different definitions of what done means. The executive sponsor thinks success means revenue growth. The technical lead thinks it means a working system. The end users think it means ease of use. When you have 3 definitions of success, you have 0 definitions of success. Here's a simple test for your next project. Can you explain the project goal in 1 sentence? Not a paragraph, 1 sentence. Can you measure success with a specific number? Not improve customer satisfaction, but increase NPS score from 32 to 45. And here's the critical question. Would all your stakeholders agree on that number? If you can pass this clarity test, you've already avoided the first root cause of failure. The second root cause is poor stakeholder management. Projects don't fail in a vacuum. They fail because people let them fail. Or worse, they fail because key decision makers were never properly identified or engaged. Influencers who could have championed the project were overlooked. Resistors who could have been addressed early were ignored until they became blockers. I've seen technically flawless projects collapse because a single stakeholder felt excluded from the process. Stakeholder management isn't a soft skill, it's a survival skill. There's a common trap that catches even experienced project managers. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the most important stakeholder. Sometimes the person who never speaks in meetings has the power to kill your project with a single email to their executive. The silent stakeholder can be the deadliest. And here's a truth that's hard to accept. Organizational politics will always trump technical merit. You can have the best solution in the world, but if the wrong person feels threatened by it, your project is in jeopardy. The third root cause is unrealistic estimates. Every project manager has experienced this. Leadership asks for an estimate. You provide a realistic one. They ask if you can do it faster. You reluctantly agree to an aggressive timeline, and from that moment, the project is already behind schedule. Optimism bias affects every estimate we make. We consistently underestimate how long tasks will take and overestimate how much we can accomplish. Add to that the pressure to commit to aggressive timelines, and you have a recipe for failure. And we haven't even mentioned the unknown unknowns, the things you can't estimate because you don't know they exist yet. Here's a practical framework for more realistic estimates. Add a 50% buffer for known risks. These are the things you can identify and plan for. Add another 25% buffer for unknown risks. These are the surprises that will inevitably emerge. And if you're working in a new domain, with new technology, or with a new team, consider doubling your initial estimate. Yes, doubling. I know this sounds excessive, but research consistently shows that novel projects take about twice as long as initially estimated. The fourth root cause is scope creep. It's the silent killer of projects. It doesn't arrive as a single massive change request. It arrives as a series of small, seemingly reasonable additions. Can we add this one feature? Can we include this additional report? Can we extend the rollout to include this department? Each change seems minor in isolation, but accumulated, these small changes add up to a project that looks nothing like what was originally planned. Teams without a formal change control process are especially vulnerable, and many project managers fear saying no to stakeholders, even when the change would derail the project. Here's how to defend against scope creep. First, document every change request formally. Even if it's a 5-minute conversation in the hallway, send a follow-up email documenting what was requested. Second, assess the impact of every change on timeline, budget, and resources. Small changes rarely have small impacts. Third, require formal sponsor approval for any scope change. This isn't about bureaucracy. It's about ensuring that the person accountable for the project's success is aware of and agrees to every modification. The fifth root cause is communication breakdown. This might be the most common and most preventable cause of project failure. Information silos form between teams, with each group operating on different assumptions. Status updates are infrequent, unclear, or both. And perhaps most dangerously, assumptions are treated as facts. Someone assumes the database team knows about the new requirement. Someone else assumes the timeline has been updated. Someone else assumes the budget has been approved. Assumption is the mother of all project failures. Effective project communication follows a cadence. Daily stand-ups keep the team aligned. These don't need to be long. 15 minutes is enough to surface blockers and coordinate work. Weekly status reports keep stakeholders informed. These should be consistent in format and focused on decisions needed, not just progress made. Monthly steering committees engage executives and sponsors. These are your opportunity to escalate issues, celebrate wins, and realign on priorities. Miss any part of this cadence and information gaps will emerge. We've covered why projects fail. Now let's talk about how your projects won't fail, because understanding the problem is only half the solution. The other half is implementing systematic practices that address each root cause. The first practice is to start every project with a charter. This is a one-page document that defines what success looks like. It captures the objectives, the scope boundaries, the key stakeholders, and the success criteria. And critically, it must be signed by the project sponsor before any work begins. The charter becomes your reference point for every decision throughout the project. When someone requests a change, you check it against the charter. When priorities conflict, you refer back to the charter. We'll cover how to create an effective charter in the next lecture. The second practice is systematic stakeholder mapping. This means identifying everyone who is affected by or can affect your project. Then you assess each stakeholder's power and interest. High power, high interest stakeholders need close management. Low power, low interest stakeholders need minimal effort. But it's the high power, low interest stakeholders you need to watch carefully. These are the people who could derail your project if they suddenly become engaged. For each stakeholder, develop a specific engagement strategy. We'll cover stakeholder mapping in depth in Lecture 3. The third practice is to estimate with buffers. Use 3-point estimation, optimistic most likely, and pessimistic. Calculate your expected duration using a weighted average. Build in contingency reserves for known risks and management reserves for unknown risks. And never, ever commit to the best case scenario. When leadership pushes for aggressive timelines, show them the data, explain the risk. If they still insist on the aggressive timeline, document it. Make it clear that you're committing under duress and with acknowledged risk. The fourth practice is rigorous scope control. Establish a change control board or process before the project starts, not after scope creep has already begun. Make the cost of changes visible. Every change request should come with a clear statement of impact on timeline and budget, and learn to say yes and instead of no. Instead of rejecting a request outright, say, yes, we can do that, and it will add 2 weeks to the timeline and require additional budget. This shifts the decision back to the stakeholder while keeping you collaborative. The fifth practice is to over-communicate. When in doubt about whether to share information, share it. Bad news travels faster when you control the narrative. If you discover a problem, report it immediately. Don't wait until you have a solution. Your stakeholders would rather know about issues early than be surprised later. And remember this, silence is never interpreted positively. When you don't communicate, stakeholders assume the worst. They fill the void with their own fears and assumptions. Regular, proactive communication prevents this. These 5 practices form the foundation of the PM Playbook framework. Charter, define success before starting work. Stakeholders, map and engage them systematically. Estimates, build in realistic buffers based on risk. Scope, control changes through formal processes. Communication, over-communicate, always. If you implement these 5 practices consistently, you will dramatically reduce your project's risk of failure. Not eliminate, reduce, because perfect projects don't exist, but failed projects are often preventable. Before we wrap up, I want you to pause and reflect. Think of a project you were involved in that failed or struggled significantly. Which of the 5 root causes was most present in that project? Was it unclear objectives, poor stakeholder management, unrealistic estimates, scope creep, communication breakdown? And ask yourself, which of the 5 practices we discussed could have prevented or mitigated that failure? This reflection will help you internalize these concepts and apply them to your future projects. Let's recap the key takeaways from this lecture. The 70% project failure rate is preventable, not inevitable. It happens because of 5 root causes: unclear objectives, poor stakeholder management, unrealistic estimates, scope creep, and communication breakdown. And it can be prevented through 5 practices, starting with a charter, mapping stakeholders, building and estimation buffers, controlling scope formally, and over-communicating consistently. In our next lecture, we'll dive deep into the first practice, the project charter. I'll show you how to define success on a single page. You'll get a template you can use immediately on your next project, and we'll walk through real examples of effective and ineffective charters. Thank you for joining me in this first lecture of the PM Playbook. Remember, the 70% failure rate is not a destiny, it's a challenge. And with the right practices, it's a challenge you can overcome. I'll see you in the next lecture. Research is hard, but your tools should not be. Subthesis.com is the free alternative to expensive software. Whether you need to calculate Chromebox Alpha or organize your field notes, Subthesis has a tool for it. No paywalls and no registration required. Check the link in the description and let's dive into today's lesson.